everywhere you hear these days, more protein. Without protein, no muscles, no youthfulness, no energy, no power. But is that really true, or are we maybe ruining our health with it? As a doctor, I can tell you the truth about protein is much more complex than the fitness industry wants us to believe. And by the end of this video, you'll know how much protein your body really needs and why too much of it can make you age faster. In recent years, there has been a real protein boom. Whether it's protein bread, protein bars, or powder, protein seems to be the answer to everything: losing weight, building muscle, eternal youth. But the truth is, there are two camps, and they seem to be irreconcilably opposed to each other. On one side is Professor Walter Longo, a leading aging researcher. He says too much protein makes you age faster and increases your risk of cancer. On the other side, the fitness scene. Influencers with flawless bodies who say, without at least 2 grams of protein per kilogram, you'll lose muscle. And then there's the carnivore movement, which has just come up recently. People who only eat meat and claim that since then, they have perfect blood values and endless energy. And in between, well, millions of people who no longer know what to believe. So let's take a closer look. And we'll do it without ideology, but with reason, with knowledge, and with science. By the way, even back in the 1950s, there was an internist from Frankfurt who observed something that is more relevant today than ever, Professor Dr. Lothar Wendt. He described that people with a very high protein diet suffered more frequently from high blood pressure, vascular changes, water retention, connective tissue problems, and also heart problems. And he called this the protein storage disease. Wendt wrote 3 textbooks about this and found out that excess protein, which cannot be completely broken down and utilized, accumulates in the tissues and blood vessels. However, this work nearly vanished from public awareness, exactly during the time of the pharmaceutical revolution. Suddenly, people became more interested in treating diseases rather than understanding their causes, and preferably with medication. But what Wendt saw back then is what we now call silent inflammation or low-grade inflammation. When protein is not properly metabolized, deposits form, oxidative stress occurs, mTOR is overactivated, and the body becomes chronically irritated. A large study from 2014 by Walter Longo, published in the journal Cell Metabolism, showed that people between the ages of 50 and 65 with high protein intake had a, good to hear, 74% higher risk of death and a 4-fold increased risk of cancer, especially when the protein was of animal origin. Why? Because animal protein permanently activates the insulin-like growth factor I and mTOR signaling pathways. What does that mean? What do these 2 signaling pathways do? Both promote growth, which is wonderful for children, but in adulthood or old age, continuous growth also means accelerated cell division, less repair, more aging, and a higher risk of cancer. Did you know how important protein is, but also that there are negative side effects? And how do you maintain your protein supply, or what do you know about it? I'm really interested, so please write it down in the comments below. Another study, a Harvard study from the year 2021, confirmed that high insulin-like growth factor 1 levels are clearly associated with increased cancer and overall mortality. Another crucial point is the amino acid methionine. It's actually more present in animal proteins. It is essential for life, but in excess it accelerates aging. So you mainly find more methionine in animal products like in meat, in eggs, in milk and dairy products. Studies show that a diet low in methionine, which naturally occurs with a plant-based diet, was able to extend the lifespan of test animals by up to 30%. So, less methionine means less oxidative stress, lower insulin-like growth factor levels, activated autophagy, which means optimizing the body's own recycling function, which actually slows down the aging process. And then there's the fascinating work of the Australian researcher David Raubenheimer and his team on the topic of protein. He discovered in countless animal studies that the mice who were fed a high-protein diet were young and perfectly defined, but died significantly earlier. Or as he put it, our sexy, slim mice who received a high-protein but low-carbohydrate diet died earlier than their peers. They made great-looking middle-aged corpses. Harsh, but I think that's something you just need to hear in this whole protein discussion. By the way, this quote can also be found in the book Nutrition, My Quintessence by Professor Andreas Mikkelsen. I know it sounds macabre, but it describes the core of the problem. More protein does actually boost performance in the short term and tones the body, but in the long run, it accelerates the aging process. The mice that received less protein lived significantly longer. They might not have been quite as well defined, but they were definitely healthier, and the same goes for us humans. Because longevity doesn't come from constant metabolic stress, but from a balance between building up and regeneration. And that's also the reason why it's said that protein requirements, by the way, increase significantly after the age of 65. That sounds as if everyone would suddenly develop a protein deficiency on their 65th birthday. Of course, that's not the case. What matters is not the chronological age, but the biological age. In other words, how well a person takes care of themselves. What does their diet look like? Do they exercise? What about their overall activity, their resilience? How do they sleep? How is their mental alertness? All of that determines how much protein the body really needs and also uses. And here you can see the big difference. People who are biologically more like 55 at 65, who are active, use their muscles, drink enough, and eat a plant-based and nutrient-rich diet, also get social and mental stimulation. They usually don't need increased protein intake. Their metabolism is stable, their muscles are activated, and their regeneration works well. But a large number of people start to lose their drive for life at exactly this age. That's probably how you could describe it. That means less physical activity, less strength training, less daily exertion, fewer fresh foods, often vitamin deficiencies, less appetite, sometimes loneliness, and sometimes even pain. The entire metabolism gradually but surely slows down more and more in some way. And that's exactly what changes protein physiology. And that leads to three things. First, muscle protein synthesis becomes slower, and the body responds less effectively to protein. You need more to achieve the same effect. Second, muscle loss or sarcopenia occurs more quickly. By the way, this is one of the biggest risk factors for falls, frailty, pain, and needing care earlier in life. It's incredible. It's become a widespread disease, but hardly anyone talks about it. We need to reach all people who are older, so from about 50 onwards, I would say. We need to tell them, hey, get moving, take care of yourselves, be good to yourselves. Because as you get older, you simply have to do a bit more for yourself. And thirdly, the repair processes in the body, they simply slow down. Wound healing, the immune system, bone metabolism, and all of that needs protein. And that's exactly why this marker is set at 65 years. Not because the age is magical, but because statistically, from this age on, the number of people who biologically age faster increases because they can no longer take care of themselves sufficiently. And that's why the clear recommendation is 1.2 to 1.3 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight for everyone over 65 who are no longer active enough or are already noticing the first signs of muscle loss. An example, a 65-year-old woman weighing 60 kilos would then need about 72 to 78 grams of protein per day. With good muscle function and an active lifestyle, it can of course be a bit less, but in cases of frailty, tendency to fall, or little physical activity, it can also be a bit more. So that's this 1.2 to 1.3. But the modern protein hysteria goes even further. Today, many people believe they constantly need to drink shakes, protein shakes, to stay healthy. However, a meta-analysis from the British Journal of Sports Medicine showed, and very clearly, more than 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight does not lead to any additional muscle gain. The effect simply levels off. No matter how much you drink or how many bars you eat, the more is better thinking is actually a myth. And there's another aspect, and unfortunately it's rarely discussed. The bioavailability of animal protein is easier for our bodies to use, but it's also more taxing on our liver and kidneys. Plant-based protein is more complex. It needs to be combined and properly prepared by soaking, sprouting, and chewing well. But then the bioavailability is completely sufficient. And the advantage, it also provides fiber, polyphenols, vitamins, and of course all the different secondary plant compounds that reduce inflammation and also strengthen our gut microbiome. And perhaps the most important insight is this: there isn't one protein formula that applies to everyone. But one thing is certain: too much protein ages you, and too little protein makes you weak. So the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Plant-based, whole foods, mindful. And if you exercise regularly, sleep well, fast occasionally, or do intermittent fasting and then eat a plant-based diet, then you benefit from the advantages of protein without its downsides. Because it's not just protein alone that keeps you young, but what you make of your life with it. If you know people who either consume too much or too little protein, be sure to send them this video. I'm sure they'll appreciate it.